We're live now, Chair.
Thank you, Carrie-Ann. Croeso bawb. Welcome to the meeting. And we're quorate, and we've got everyone except David, and we're hoping he's going to join us soon. So we have no apologies as far as we know. And we can move swiftly on to declarations of interest. I don't think we need to declare, but if anybody feels they should, no. So we'll move on swiftly to the minutes of the board, which is a long time ago now. I apologise, this meeting has been deferred twice due to availability issues. The second time, mainly myself, the first time, others. So we're now good to get everyone together. And those minutes were on 18th of July, and Chris is going to share now, so we can see those.
Yep.
And at that time, I think, but do we want to take a true record first? Anybody got any corrections or? No?
Remind me, I guess, Chair, just at the top of or the start of the minutes, it was held at County Hall, wasn't it, in the Chamber in County Hall? So whether that just needs to be included just as a true record.
It was indeed.
So there's a gap there. You're right, Graham. Yeah, in the text, isn't it? Yeah.
But other than that,
Yeah, thanks for that scrutiny, Graham. That's a good addition. I think in terms of matters arising, I think in minute 11, in the standing items, we were quite concerned at that juncture about MacLeod and whether we would be able to process the remedy in time. I think in the months that have ensued, we're in a much better place by now, and we were in a reasonable place by August when the benefit statements went out. It wasn't quite as bad as we feared back in July, I think. Yeah, the 12 mentions the future board meetings amended to 23rd of October and now amended to 9th of December, of course. Shout if there's anything you want to raise. I think we considered at that time the committee minutes from 19th of June. Since that date, there have been 3 more formal committee meetings and other informal committee gatherings as well regarding WPP, IMCO, etc. We'll park that for now and pick it up the committee meetings under the next item, where we look at their September minutes. Similarly, with the operational and legislative issues in the minutes, there's so much going on now with MHCLG consultations, Scheme Advisory Board advice, etc. We'll pick all that up under the operational update, which is to follow in agenda item 6. As I said, we were in July, we had an update on the IMCO, and a lot has happened, but we'll pick that up under the WPP update, which is in agenda item 9 today. I think Debbie asked in July in the minutes there whether there would be a separate legal advisor for the new investment management company. And I asked that same question when we met the company CEO, Rob, and Burgess Salmon, who were providing advice. We met them about 3 weeks ago, I think, was it, Chris? And both IMCO and the 8 administering authorities are currently both advised by Burgess Salmon. At the present time, no conflict is perceived. We're working convergently to the same objective, striving towards the same ends, so that no conflict is perceived at the moment. if a conflict develops in future, Burgess Salmon confirmed that they'll continue to advise the 8 administering authorities, that's Powys and the 7 other Wales councils with pension funds, and the WPP IM Corps will engage other legal advisors if and when necessary. So we've taken that forward for you, Debbie. It seems acceptable at the moment, but some of us did perceive in future there may be something of a disagreement on the size of the company and what's going to be internalized or commissioned, etc. So we will keep an eye on that going forward. In July, also the board reviewed the administrative pillar of the risk register, and we'll pick that up under standing item 10B later today. And the July board also noted the administration team's performance and improving trends there. We'll pick that up under agenda item 15 later this morning. So with that, I can welcome Dave Powell. Chris or Dave. And that's all I've got to say in matters arising from our own minutes. Anybody else got, we're happy to accept those? Yeah. Diolch pawb. Oh, carry on.
Chair, could we have a proposer and a seconder for the approval
Sure,
of the
yeah.
minutes?
Yeah. Debbie's proposed and I think Graham seconded, yeah. So everybody in favour?
Yeah, can I have a show of hands, Chair? That's.
Oh, I can't vote.
Thank you. That's perfect.
Thank you, Carrie-Anne, keeping me on the straight and narrow. Right, so moving on to the minutes of the Pensions Committee. And as I said, these are the minutes of the 3rd of September, and I think there have been 2 other meetings since then, Chris, haven't there? One usually primarily just for the annual report, but there were several other items to discuss there this time.
Yeah, so in respect to that, David, I managed to review and review those minutes yesterday, so they weren't ready in time for this meeting, essentially.
Okay, we might refer to 1 or 2 things mentioned at those 2 meetings we haven't got minutes for. The first, just picking up on the minutes we have got here, the compliments and complaints policy was approved there, I think, and it does mention in the minutes there minor updates. It's minute 7, Chris, minor updates have been made following the pension board recommendations. So they listened to what we had to say on that one. The annual report was there in minute 11 in draft form at that time. That's now been finalised and issued in final form, including the parts on behalf of the pension board, which we saw about 6 months ago by now. But the whole shebang has now been completed and is available on the website, etc. In September, we had quite a good discussion on the investment strategy review and views expressed on the fund's risk appetite. And the minutes refers to currency hedging, but there was also discussion on equity hedging. I think that following that meeting, I think Chris and Jane have had discussions with Aon and the subsequent meeting just last week. There was an update on that, and I think the upshot is that the fund now is more than 100% funded for the first time and can take a slightly less risk-averse standpoint on the investment strategy. And we'll say a bit more on that, perhaps. Anybody else got anything to raise on the September minutes? No. So I'll refer to some of the subsequent committee meetings, perhaps in my update now, which is the next item, and some of the recent developments and ongoing priorities since the last pension board. I've been present at several pensions committee meetings, that September one, also 27th of November and the 5th of December, all virtual. There's been a lot discussed and decided in those meetings. A huge amount of work going on by officers and Chris and Jane and Clive as well, involved in the legal side of WPP, etc., with Project Snowdon. The board chairs, myself and the other 7 board chairs have met with WPP regarding Project Snowdon in Cardiff on 29th of October, and we had virtual meetings on 15th of September, 5th of November and 20th of November. We've been consulted on the major developments there. Very pleased that WPP are being inclusive with the boards, so I'm able to reassure you that things are moving forward in a controlled and sensible manner. External engagements. I was a speaker at the Scheme Advisory Board Chairs Assembly, the first time they had a meeting in London, inviting all the board chairs and all the committee chairs, and it was well attended. And I managed to get invited on stage to speak with a Powys badge on, so managed to say a few words in the Welsh language and got them to see the Wales point of view on things and the Powys point of view in perhaps a few of the aspects discussed there. As we said, I've been able to contribute towards the Powys Pension Fund policy and governance. As I mentioned earlier, we challenged Aon's actuaries and assumptions regarding the valuation and came to a really good conclusion on that, which I think they've got a surplus buffer in place, which was increased from 5 to 10%. I'm pleased with that in terms of fund prudence, because that will mean that we're in a place which avoids having the trampoline effect of employer contributions going down very sharply and then bouncing back up. The employer contributions will go down, but perhaps to a level which is sustainable. So very pleased with the outcome on that. We challenged Aon's consultants on the investment advice as well regarding the funding strategy and asset allocation, and that's more of an evolution than a revolution, I think, isn't it, Chris? With there's a change of approach now with phasing out equity protection and change of approach because we're now more than 100% funded with that surplus buffer to keep us safer. We can be a bit more cavalier than we were in terms of the investment strategy, which should serve us in good stead going forward. I've also worked with Chris on the cyber security policy, which is coming to us later, and also assisted Chris with the draft of MHCLG consultations, and we'll be working together on those going forward over Christmas, as we were discussing in the green room before coming in. That there are consultations and draft regulations which require responses by the 2nd and 12th of January, which does mean perhaps we'll be working over Christmas. So that's my brief update on. We haven't had a board meeting since several months, but there's been a whole lot going on. Do you want to add anything to that, Chris? Or?
No, I think that's fair, Chair. I think perhaps just one additional date, which I'm not sure you included in your list of meetings and engagement from the IMCO, was we met with the IMCO on the 3rd of December as well, virtually. And that was with the Pensions Investment Committee, the officers of the fund, and David representing the pension board as well. So throughout this journey so far, just to echo the point that the IMCO has really tried to be engaging with the funds to make sure it delivers on what we want and what we need. So apologies if you did mention that date, David. I just missed it in the ones that you quoted.
No, fine. Yeah, no, I didn't mention that. Perhaps I should add that during this time I've also taken on an additional role as chair of the board in Merseyside Pension Fund, which I think will complement my role for Powys. There's some economies of scale there, that reading some of the same documents for two different clients, if you like. That'll help me, and it's already helped with things like the cyber policy, which I've been able to compare across the organisations. So I can also now compare what's happening in the northern pool with WPP. And I can say really that WPP are several months ahead of Northern, and WPP is still working to the government's deadline. But I think we'll come back to that in the specific item. So that's, I think, completes my update. We can move on to is it item 7? The operational update from Chris.
Thank you, Chair. We've already touched on the fact there's a lot going on within the LGPS. This report is trying to summarise at the point of writing. Things have actually moved on since I wrote this report. What's been happening in the LGPS. So you've got all the information in one place, essentially. So I'm not going to go through every point. We touched on a few of these already, but the Pension Schemes Bill, so the legislation is being considered by government and is passing through the various establishments for approval and readings. Some links to the current state of the documents there for you. Just to mention briefly, there has been some amendments to some of the clauses within that document, but that's available within the hyperlinks for you to get some more detail on that. We briefly touched upon McLeod Remedy. There's been some discussions, ongoing discussions nationally around this. It's complicated in the fact that we're all requesting data off each other, and we've all hold it in slightly different forms and whatnot. So translating it and migrating it from one system to another has been proved challenging. So the National Pensions Officer Group have agreed a standardised form of sharing this data, which is going to make it easier for administrators, which is welcome because we are requesting and working with a lot of data on this. I thought I'd just take this opportunity to update board with where we're at in terms of McLeod. I know the chair briefly mentioned it as part of the minutes of the previous meeting. We've now got a projects officer in place. The fund, they started on Monday, and their priority project is the McLeod project. So they're currently building up a project plan, or working through the understanding of the McLeod initially, and then building up a project plan as to how we tackle it and how we best allocate resource to tackling this project. So it's my intention over the next few meetings, over the next few months, to be able to update board with a progress report and how we're progressing along the McLeod project. So you'll have more than just me saying it's going and we're doing it. Hopefully, I'm aiming to present some data to you in terms of numbers and timescales and things. So now we have some dedicated resource to be able to look at that. I'm going to update and try and inform you better in terms of progress along the McLeod journey. 2.4 is just there for information. 2.5 is there for information, and it's just pulling out of the national LGPS annual report, essentially some high-level figures to give you a flavour of how the LGPS is evolving from year to year. I'm not going to go through each bullet point for you. It is there for your information, but essentially it's growing and maturing, I guess is probably the easiest way to summarise the developments in the LGPS. Hopefully you've had the chance to read it. I will stop there if there are any questions, because this tends to be quite an interesting point for the committees and boards, but the link to the report is there for you in 2.5, and those are the high-level bullet points for your information. One thing just to draw out of it a little bit is that the increase in retirements nationally, the last bullet point there, is something we've seen locally as well. We have seen an increase in the number of retirements, and in fact, this this latest annual report is the first time we've seen it tip over into being more pension scheme members than active members. So we're at that tipping point in terms of our membership as well. We knew about this. This is not a surprise to us, which is why we've been developing the investment strategy and the cash flow modeling over some years to arrive at this point here. But I thought it was just interesting to see that we are seeing that trend locally as well at the Powis Fund, as well as nationally. 2.6 and 2.7 go into some consultations that we've touched upon. 2.6 is looking at the member benefits, and the fund did respond to this consultation via the Pensions Officer Group. So a response went from Wales as a collective through the national group and back to MHCLG using that approach. This one was launched over the summer. This one's closing on the 22nd of December, and we expect to submit a response ahead of that one. 2.7 is talking about a consultation that was launched by the government on the 20th of November, and that's in respect to some draft legislation. So the Fit for the Future consultation was launched in November 2024, as we've talked about it an awful lot over the past 12 months or so. The results of that consultation is these two sets of draft legislation and those two bullet points that they've produced. One is looking at the investment side of things in terms of pooling, which was the first 2/3 of the consultation, of the Fit for the Future consultation. The second bullet point is looking at the governance aspect within that consultation. So the last third of the Fit for the Future consultation was in respect of governance. So they've produced these two sets of legislation to tackle the whole consultation. So as the chair mentioned, the consultation closes on the 2nd of January. So we'll be working together over the next couple of weeks to try and pull together a response on behalf of the fund. But we're hoping that there'll be some responses from the WPP and partner funds in Wales as well. So there might be some collaboration in how we deliver this response, considering the timescales are tight. And obviously we have Christmas in the middle of that as well. In addition, since writing this report, there was another consultation launched yesterday, which closes on the 12th of January, and that's in respect of the guidance supporting these draft legislation that they've produced here. So another consultation on the go as well. So currently we have 3 active consultations live, and we are intending to try and respond to all 3 with as meaningful responses as we possibly can. So there's a lot going on, as we previously mentioned. 2.8 is there for information, primarily because if what we see has been followed in previous years follows through this year as well, then we expect the CPI, so the pensions increase amount in April, to be 3.8%, based on the CPI figure at the end of September. We await formal confirmation of that, but if it follows the previous approach, then we're expecting to pay 3.8% on our pensions from April 2026. Chair has briefly mentioned the annual report. It has now been published and was published ahead of the statutory required date of the 1st of December, and it's hyperlinked in 2.9 for you to be able to view the final version on our website. Section 3 is moving into some Scheme Advisory Board updates and presented really for information for board. 3.2 is an interesting one. You might be aware, you might not be aware, but the Reform Party put out a statement about the LGPS and their views on the LGPS in September. Well, not August, I think it might have been actually. The Scheme Advisory Board and various other industry bodies put out some counter responses to that, essentially refuting what Reform was saying about the running of the LGPS. So there's a link to the factual summary that the Scheme Advisory Board produced in response to that, available in 3.2 if you haven't had the chance to read it yet. Pensions dashboards is covered as a separate item on the agenda, so I'll leave that one there. 3.4 is there for information, just to make board aware that there has been a lot of discussion recently from various lobby groups on the approach to investments within areas of conflict, and in particular Israel and the occupied Palestine territories. As an officer and as a fund, we've received several requests from various groups for information, freedom of information requests and whatnot. It's not unique to us. There has been national, and the Palestine Solidarity Campaign actually wrote with a legal position paper, which is linked to in 3.4, setting out their views on various aspects of regulation. and it was calling on funds to divest from various companies and investments that they see as being unethical, essentially. So the Scheme Advisory Board wrote to the Minister for the LGPS, essentially asking for their views and guidance on this, because a lot of what's in that paper is actually outside of the pension regulation, potentially into international law and whatnot. So it's wider than just pension investments and pension regulation. So as far as I'm aware, at this point, we're still waiting for a response on that. It was just to make board aware there's quite a lot going on around that sort of area of investments and regulation as well. Moving on to 3.5, quite helpfully, the Scheme Advisory Board has published some legal advice on pooling governance, and in particular, conflicts of interest. And I've inserted this section because I just wanted to bring board up to date on conflicts of interest. Board might remember that you considered the conflicts of interest policy in draft form in July's meeting. And the usual process is board will consider it, provide their comments, and I will then take it to committee for approval at a later date. Now, I haven't done that yet because things have moved on since July, essentially, and I think we're at the point where we actually need to revisit the conflicts of interest policy for a couple of reasons. One is because the Scheme Advisory Board have produced this guidance, so we need to make sure we're compliant with the Scheme Advisory Board guidance. There's a greater expectation within the regulator's code of practice on conflicts of interest, and it's also captured within the new draft regulations which have been published. So I thought, rather than taking it to committee to approve, to then have to revisit it very, very shortly, I've just paused that for now, and we need to review it again before we take it on to committee because of everything that's happened since the summer, essentially. So as soon as I'm able to, you'll see a new version of the draft conflicts of interest policy for consideration, probably at the first meeting next year. Pensions regulator is just there for information. There's a hyperlink to a blog that they produce quite regularly at the end of 4.1. Again, quite a lot going on from the regulator's perspective, primarily focused on cybersecurity, data quality, etc. But there's a link to that latest blog there for you. 5 is looking at some other matters that are ongoing within the LGPS at the minute. 5.1 is just a brief update to the resourcing within the pensions team. Obviously, board will be aware that we've been trying to grow the team over the past 12 to 18 months. And I'm pleased to say we're approaching the end of the recruitment campaign for that now. I've already mentioned that we have a projects officer started yesterday. We have a systems manager coming in on the 5th of January. And we've also appointed internally to a governance and communications post and to a training and employer post as well. So that's 4 posts that we've been able to recruit into over recent months. And come the start of January, we'll be up to almost a full complement with 1 more post still to fill. So that's really pleasing. That will really support the governance around the admin team and myself in terms of what we need to and are expected to do with the fund as we move forward. 5.2, we've briefly touched upon the valuation. The chair mentioned that we've had some discussions around that. Just to give board an update on part of the process, which is in relation to the funding strategy statement. This is a document we have to produce under legislation. Part of the process involves a consultation with the fund employers. So I took a draft version of the FSS, the funding strategy statement, to committee in September. In October, it then went out for consultation with the employers, and we presented a final version to committee on the 5th of December, which incorporated feedback from employers and any discussions that we'd had elsewhere ahead of that meeting as well. So there are essentially 2 changes within that document to what was in the draft. One was to do with the surplus buffer, which the chair has already mentioned out. We've pushed that out a little bit to give us some more prudence within the fund. And the other one is to do with the recovery, the default recovery period for the fund as reduced from 13 years to 12 years. And that's just to reflect the fact that the fund is moving towards a funding positive position of over 100%. So that has now been finalised, and once we're able to get it through the processes, we'll get it published ASAP as well. But it's very, very similar to the draft that has been shared previously. One final thing, and that's just to in respect of 5.4, that's just to give board the assurances that every year we have to submit a return to the pensions regulator. Our deadline this year was the 3rd of December, and we actually submitted the return on the 28th of November. So we've complied with our statutory requirement to submit the annual return in time as well. So quite a lot in that report, Chair. I have skipped through it fairly quickly, so I do apologise if I've glanced over anything that you might want to discuss, but over to board now for any comment or any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody, any questions for Chris? There's a lot to take in there, and a lot for Chris and the team to be taking in and acting on, to be honest. It sounds crazy that we have the valuations every 3 years, which means that the funding strategy is also reviewed coterminously, and we've also got all this pooling going on and the governance changes as well. It's all happening at once, really. So it's good planning that we put the wheels in motion to get a bit of support for Chris going forward, and those posts will pay dividends over coming months, I'm sure. Unless anybody's raising anything, perhaps Dave, go on.
Yes, thanks, David. There's a lot in there, Chris. So yeah, thank you. On the collection of the data, the LGPS, I had a very, very quick look at it. Talking through the link. So apologies if you want the detail. Did they cover it? One of the things you remember.
Dave, you're not coming through very clearly.
Okay. Hang on, let me move my mic. Can you hear me now? Right, okay. Right. Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's much better.
Okay, right. Sorry. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt
Did
you.
they collect the average amount of pension in the data that was paid?
You're on mute, Chris.
Apologies, David. Did you ask, have I included, or is the annual amount of pension available? Is that the question?
Yeah, the average amount, because it's quite misleading when I think about what Reform are saying. I remember that when I was working at Powys, one of the things I think you and I discussed was that actually the average amount of pension paid isn't quite what the public think.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, we hear the term gold-plated pension quoted in the press all the time, but the reality is that the pension's not as large as what people expect. I don't know what the average figure is, and I can't tell you if it's included in that report. I can't remember, if I'm honest, David.
No, it's okay.
But if it's of interest, I can find out and share it later. Yeah.
It's just this point, and I think like a lot of people, I bristled when I read the comments that the Reform Party had made, because it's not actually, I think, factually correct. And good to see a good response going, but it is a fact that people talk about gold-plated pensions, but the reality is you're talking about people who do school crossing patrols. You're talking about people who are teaching assistants, and this is not what the public think it is. And so anyway, just a comment there. I can check the data anyway, Chris, myself, to see if it did, but I couldn't see it. Thanks, David.
No, I do recall that it was a figure previously somewhere around between 5 and 10,000, I think, rather than a very large figure, which the gold-plated suggests. Yeah, as you say, lots of people on near to the real minimum wage and perhaps part-time, etc., being looked after. I think that the real deal is that the LGPS is in a very good place now in terms of funding generally, and we're able to reduce employer contributions. If you compare the LGPS to the other public unfunded schemes like the teachers and the firefighters and civil service, etc., the contribution rate in those unfunded schemes is considerably higher now than the LGPS. So I think the focus perhaps should have been on why didn't the other schemes become funded and look after themselves more, rather than having to go pay as you go to the taxpayer. But there we are. We're never going to get there now. The LGPS is in a good place. I think if I can, unless anyone else has got something, I was going to go through a set of slides after today's meeting, but the regulations have superseded that slightly. Chris mentioned several of the current consultations, and specifically the Fit for the Future regs. We've mentioned the pooling regs several times in terms of what they require us to do in Wales is set up an IM core, also requiring us to be 100% pooled, moving all our assets into the fund, the pool, etc. So we know about that side of things. The other side of things, the amendments regs, as they call them, the governance side, I thought I'd summarise those regulations for you at this juncture rather than doing the slides now. These have come out during about a week ago, is it, Chris? And they're very hot off the press, but there's a set of regs there, currently draft regulations, but I would say they're 99.9% certain of being enacted after Christmas. I'll just run through the principal changes there. Regulation 3 of the amendment regs introduces new requirements for administering authorities to appoint an officer with overall delegated responsibility for the scheme. That's not a problem for Powys. I think we can nominate Chris without any problem for us. It does create issues for some other schemes where you have the treasurer taking the sort of lead role and perhaps people accountable to the treasurer separately on the investment and the admin side in separate sections with separate managers. So some other funds in Wales and outside we'll have to have a look at that. All administering authorities will also have to appoint an independent person as a member of the committee to advise on investment strategy, governance and administration. So this is a sort of quasi-trustee, professional trustee role. They'll have to appoint a non-voting advisor onto the pensions committee. Without being big-headed, I think I've been doing a bit of that already in Powys over the last year in terms of perhaps going beyond what the board chair does in other places in comments to the committee. And I can see that, you know, it might help to have something like that, but it's a requirement now. So that will have to happen too. There are some pension funds who have those already, largely in England, I think, not Wales. So it'll be a bit of a step for most of the Welsh pension funds. Regulation 5 requires admin authorities to produce a governance strategy, a training strategy, and a conflicts of interest policy. So I think we're most of the way there on
Yes.
some of those. We'll have to review them all, as Chris said, but I think we'll have to make sure they're up to scratch. But we're reasonably in a good place on that. Regulation 5 also requires the committee to have a knowledge and understanding. Current existing regulations require the board to have that, which is the sort of training and knowledge that's required. And it's been, I think, although it's not been legislatively required, it's been acted as if it was for the committee as well. We've had them involved in training, and I think training has ramped up since pooling in Wales. We've got an endless supply of online training from commercial partners, but also some directed and targeted at our needs from WPP. So I think we're in a decent place with that as well. Regulation 6 allows administering authorities to include links to documents in the annual reports rather than having to include the full text of those documents, which is very sensible. It's saving a couple of rainforests in not producing those, even though they're now online. It'll be if they're online, then a hyperlink is usually much easier. That someone doesn't have to skip 20 pages to get to the next part of the annual report. So that's sensible. Regulation 7 clarifies that administering authorities must prepare their funding strategy in accordance with legislative guidance. That's stuff coming out of MHCLG now rather than out of SIPFA as it was. And makes me a bit sad that, because I was on the SIPFA pensions panel, which was producing some of these things, but that's me being nostalgic, and I think we've moved ahead from there several years ago. Regulation 8 requires authorities to prepare a pension administration strategy and to review that triennially. I think the initial draft had that every 2 years, but they've sensibly made it triennial, which dovetails nicely with the valuation and funding strategy reviews. It doesn't have to happen in the same year. It would be sensible, perhaps, for it not to happen in the same year, so we don't have everything at the same time. And then Regulation 9 requires admin authorities to arrange for governance reviews to be carried out by an independent person. I think the devil might be in the detail on that when we don't really know what the guidance which came yesterday might tell us, which we'll catch up on. But yeah, that could be someone borrowed from another LGPS scheme who will review our governance reviews, etc. It could be someone independent from outside the LGPS, but I think the idea might be of sort of peer reviews, and they might use people like myself occasionally. So we'll see where that one goes. Lots of stuff required on the governance side. As I said, we've often talked about the pooling requirements, but now we've got clarification on the governance side as well. Those are the matters we'll have to move ahead with. I think it's most of them are sensible, and we're partway there for most of it. Chris, anything to add?
No, thanks, Chair. Just, I think the thinking behind this governance part of the Fit for the Future consultation was to try and bring everyone to the same place in the LGPS. There's 85 funds doing things slightly differently across the England and Wales. This is bringing in a minimum standard. So we all now need to provide these documentation. It's set in law and regulation. And as the Chair rightly mentioned, we're coming from a good place. We have a lot of these documents already in place, but we'll need to review them to make sure they do meet the expected requirements in legislation. So no reinventing of the wheel for us in terms of the documentation, but we just need to review it to make sure that it remains compliant. That was a really high level summary from the Chair. I have been through the regulations myself and just had a quick scan of the guidance. There's a lot more underneath those 8 or 9 bullet points that the Chair has just pulled out. So there's quite a lot more for us to dive into. And that's what we'll do as part of the response to the consultation. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, I can't see any hands up. So would anyone propose that we accept that operational update and move on? Yeah, Graham, nothing. Everybody happy? Yeah, Debbie, thank you. So, right, moving on to item 8, is it? Or
I think it is, Chair. Yeah.
pension dashboard progress updates, which will be a quick one, I think, Chris.
Very quick. It's just included in the pack. When I prepared this for the October meeting, we hadn't arrived at the key date of the 31st of October 2025. But essentially, this is just setting out a bit of history as to why the dashboard program is important. It's just a quick refresher. It's an online portal for pension savers to be able to log into and access all their pension information from one place, rather than potentially having to log into multiple systems to compile their pensions data. So as a pensions provider, the LGPS will obviously have to feed into this ecosystem. And the challenge for us has been to make sure that our data is compliant with the expected data standards. And the key thing really is that we had a connection date of the 31st of October 2025. And I'm pleased to say this paper is just there for reassurance that we did connect to the ecosystem by the 31st of October 2025. It's been very quiet since. So we are live and connected to the dashboard ecosystem, but we are expecting things to ramp up over the next 12 months as more schemes join the ecosystem and people start using it and whatnot. I think essentially it's like a soft launch at this point in time, but we had a regulatory requirement to connect by 31st of October, and we did that. We carried out some data quality assurance testing, and our data is in a really good place in respect of what's required. And we have set some matching criteria and some parameters in place so that when somebody logs into the system, that we only are sharing data for the individual, and obviously not sharing it for somebody who's not the right person. And by that, there are various yes or no questions going on behind the scenes. So is there a national insurance number? No. Is there a surname and a postcode? Various different matching criteria that we've been able to build in to make sure that we're only providing data for the person that we need to. If we're unable to do that, then it prompts the individual to contact us, essentially. And at that point, we'll be able to verify their identity and make the connection that way. So that was just there for information, really. We've done what we need to do. We have got the systems in place. In terms of the impact on the team, at this point, it's a bit of an unknown. This is the first time it's been done. And I guess the proof will be in the pudding as to when people start using it as more schemes connect to the ecosystem environment over the next 12 months or so. So just wanted to give board the assurances that we've checked the data, we've connected, and we're ready to go, essentially. So that's what this report is trying to summarize. So that was it, really, Chair, in terms of what I wanted to present. I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
So basically, I think the LGPS has all now connected, but there's no sort of proof of the pudding, as you said, until every pension fund gets live on it.
I think so, yeah.
And only then will it be opened up for individual scheme members to have a look, and then we'll see if we've got several pension pots, we'll be able to see them all in one screen. But that's about a year hence still. Is that the time scale? I think there were different sectors who were going on different times, and then different sizes of private pension schemes, which were the biggest first and the small ones to follow. So there are still several to go through the hoops, I think.
Correct. I think the time frame they're looking at, obviously you're more interested in hours, essentially, make sure we hit hours, but I believe it's by 31st of October 2026. That's when they're looking to have all the pension arrangements in place. So it could be this time next year we'll have a better flavour for the impact it's having.
So we're confident ours is in there, but we as individuals, we can't go on and check for another year. So it's one of those,
I think I'm not sure, I haven't tested it myself. You might be able to check, but the risk is you might only get a partial response. So because we're the only fund connected, if you've got other private pensions elsewhere, it might only just extract or return our pensions data. So it only gives you part of the picture. So I guess there's some risk attached to that.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we'll watch this space and we'll see how things develop.
Okay. Everyone happy to note that and move on? Thanks, David. Yeah. Right. Next item is the WPP update. There are lots of pages of information here, which is lots of it is basically what was presented by different people at the September Joint Governance Committee. And so I don't think we're going to go through every page of the appendices, but take us through the report then, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That's correct. The appendices are documents prepared by the WPP for us to be able to share around the individual funds. They are their documents, so I wasn't planning on going through them in any detail. They're there for your information, for you to be able to read. So one thing I did really want to focus on at this part of this report is point 3 onwards, basically. And this is just bringing you up to date on developments within the WPP and the IMCO. And the key development, I guess, is that in September, I think it was, the Wales Pension Partnership Investment Management Company appointed the Chief Executive Officer. So they appointed a gentleman called Mr. Rob Lamb. And Rob has a long history with the LGPS and private sector pension arrangements. If you click on the hyperlink in paragraph 3, it gives you a bit more detail about Rob. But But in terms of the impact that we've seen locally, we've engaged with Rob many times. In fact, I was on a call with him yesterday as part of a group call. Rob has been to visit us in person. So the senior officers at the fund and the chair and the vice chair of the committee met with Rob, and where we sat down and chatted through the fund's needs in person and Rob's future visions for the company and whatnot. So Rob's been very engaging, and the IMCO have been really pushing things on in terms of the government timescales, which we know are very, very tight. We touched on it earlier on about migrating all the legacy assets by 31st of March 2026. So some more information about Rob there. The company is looking to set up headquarters in Cardiff, have a physical presence in Cardiff, and in terms of legislative requirements, there's various different legal agreements that are being drafted as we speak, and that's to set out the relationship between the fund as a shareholder and a client to the IMCO. So we're just working through the legal paperwork and what that might look like at this point in time. There's obviously a requirement for the investment management company to be FCA regulated. That was the big thing in the Fit for the Future consultation, was why the WPP had to evolve. It had to become a regulated FCA entity, which is why the company has been set up. So I think the FCA submission has been submitted, and the FCA are currently working through that application, and we'll be answering questions in due course from that submission. So that was essentially what I wanted to discuss in terms of point 3.1. So I'm happy to stop there and take any questions or comments before I move on to 3.2, or unless there's anything you want to add yourself, Chair. We have touched upon the WPP earlier on in the agenda, but I'm happy to answer any questions or comments that you might have at that point.
Yeah, just some context really, that the proposed legislation has meant that there were 8 LGPS pools, and we noted, I think, in July that Access and Brunel were not being allowed to continue. 4 of the others are already FCA approved investment management companies, which means that Northern and Wales are having to establish companies themselves to take those 2 pools forward. The challenge for the other 4 is a bit different insofar as the orphan funds from Access and Brunel are joining the likes of Central, Borders to Coast, etc. And the challenge for them is onboarding all their new partner clients, so the only sort of direct counterpart for us is Northern. Wales and Northern are on the same journey. As I said, I'm involved in Merseyside now, and I can say that WPP is about 3 months ahead of Northern in terms of moving towards achieving this agenda. WPP appointed a chief exec back in September. Northern have yet to do so 3 months later. They're doing a very comprehensive recruitment exercise. I think we were very fortunate that Rob was already doing consultancy work for WPP and was available and on our doorstep, and an ideal candidate. And then Northern have already told MHCLG that they're going to work to their own deadline of the end of June rather than March, but WPP are still aiming for the statutory deadline, which will keep the government on side, I think, in moving ahead, which is important. I think we've always been seen as being quite agile and able to move together in Wales as 8 funds. So yeah, it's lots happening, as we said earlier, and I think there are several other jobs which have been advertised, haven't they, Chris? And
Yep. As part of the FCA submission, there's an expectation to have named employees in place. So I think the company been working very hard on the recruitment part of that process to make sure they have these people in place as soon as possible to give the FCA the assurances that they need. I think from conversations, a big part of what the FCA do in this is they're actually regulating the people involved as well, and not just the company and whatnot. So it's a very important part of the process, which the WPP IMCO are really focusing on. We're pushing on very, very quickly from here, I think.
Indeed. So, yeah. And as I said earlier, I think we all appreciate the amount of work that officers are doing in addition to their day job on this over, well, it's more than a year now, isn't it, Chris? It's
Believe it or not, it has flown. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks to all concerned. I mentioned yourself and Jane and Clive earlier, but
Dan as well has been involved in this.
and
Yeah.
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
And everything sort of other things get shared because you're on this. So it's thanks to everybody who's taken on additional duties because of this.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. If everyone's happy, I'll just quickly move on to 3.2, just to develop on that really. 3.2 is just acknowledging that the WPP actually won an investment award at the LAPF Investment Awards on the Investment Innovation Award. But as somebody pointed out on a call I was on yesterday, it's actually the third award that the WPP has won in 12 months. The most recent two are in respect of this innovation in terms of private market investments that WPP has set up. There's been quite a big positive impact in terms of local investments and impact investing within Wales, and that's been acknowledged. It's really nice to see that acknowledged by the industry, that the WPP has really been doing a good job in terms of that over the past 12 months or so. So there's a link there just to some photographs of the chair of our committee, who's also the chair of the Joint Governance Committee, accepting an award on behalf of the WPP with Anthony Parnell from Carmarthenshire. So it was just to put into the paper and acknowledge the fact that WPP has been making some positive strides in the industry as well.
I think they also won the equivalent prize at the LGC Awards on 28th November.
They did.
For the same category.
Because I rolled this paper forward, I think I didn't have time to insert the next award that they'd also won since then as well. So yeah, they've won two in the past month, both related to the same sort of innovation piece. So that concludes my report, Chair. Obviously, I'm happy to take any more further comments or questions. Thanks.
Yeah, there's as I said, a lot of papers attached. And anybody got any questions on any part of that, or happy to receive Chris's report as it stands? Nods all round. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all. So we'll move right forward to page, is it 73? To the standing items. I think so.
Yes, there we are. Item 10.
And I don't think there's anything, any breaches to report on this item, Chris, is there? But
no.
I think the difference this time, I think in 3.1 there, we usually review a pillar of the risk register in each of our meetings. Chris and I had a chat in advance of the meeting. We've now got a governance officer in post, and we'll be asking that officer to review the entire risk register and come back to us with suggestions over the course of the next few months. And thinking perhaps we'll do the whole shebang in a future meeting rather than going through the risk register today. It is there again as an appendix, but I'm not suggesting we go through that either. So sorry, I've stolen your message on this, Chris, but
it's fine. Just one thing to add, Chair, if that's all right. Since producing this report, the only change to the risk register was in respect of, I think it's Gov 0001. It came up for review and I updated the mitigation on the risk. essentially to point out it's a risk relating to reconciling employer contributions that come into the fund. And it was just to acknowledge the fact that we now have an employer officer in post as well. So part of their responsibilities will be to revisit the process in terms of how contributions come in, to see whether there are any efficiencies, any automations and whatnot that we can build in. So it's just acknowledging that we've actually increased the resource in respect of this. So that's strengthened the mitigation, really. No change to the score, just change to the text around it. But that's the only change.
Okay. Any
Can I
questions?
just add something on 4.1,
Sure. Yeah.
Chair, if that's okay? Again, I don't intend to go through the appendix, which is the Pension Regulators Code of Conduct. But we do also, as we've touched on this a few times, have the governance officer in place. Part of their responsibility will be to regularly review the code of practice compliance tool. So the intention is that we'll be able to bring an updated version to the board meetings from now on. Part of their first jobs will be to dive into the code of practice compliance to work through any areas that are weaker and that might need strengthening. We have carried out a light touch review between us as officers since we last met. And again, we're starting from a pretty good place. And the governance officer will start on the areas where we do need to strengthen. So you might remember for last time we looked at this, there's a red and green sort of sliding bar chart. So an example's here in front of you. What this is showing you is how compliant we are in terms of various modules within the code of practice. Those that are furthest to the left are the areas that we'll start on, essentially. So I've been through this a couple of times since the code launched in March 2024. We're now going to do a deep dive into it and spend more time fleshing out these modules because the regulator is expecting more evidence-based reporting on this. So we have a new tool, and within that tool, there is the evidence to attach, there's the space to attach evidence or even hyperlink to evidence if we have policies in place and whatnot. So that's the next step, is for us to just strengthen the evidence. It's no longer acceptable for me just to fill out this and say, yes, we have a policy in place. The regulator is expecting us to identify the part of the policy that's appropriate and either copy the text across or hyperlink to that specific part. And that's in reality to strengthen the governance in the fund. If I wasn't available, somebody might be able to step into my shoes and know exactly what I'm pointing at. So it's just to strengthen the expectations within that code. So very high level since we last spoke. We'll spend a lot more time on this moving forward. In terms of us, I mean the officers and potentially the board as well. That was all I wanted to say on that, Chair. That's okay.
Yeah.
Take any comments, obviously.
Obviously, we'll get back to this when more opportunity. As we've said already, there's so much going on at the moment. It's so lots of papers there as well, Chris. So I can't see any hands up. So may I presume that we accept that report, and thanks to Chris for the work on that. We've got the future board meetings as the next item. There's 4 dates noted there. Hopefully you'll all have them in your diaries. Anybody have any difficulty with those dates, so we can proceed on that basis? No hands, so assume so. So now we need to go exempt. So Carrie Ann, is it okay for me to read that out? And
Yes, please, Chair. And then if we could have a proposer and seconder and show of hands to move into confidential.
so the board needs to consider, in accordance with section 106.8 Local Government Pension Scheme Regs 23, 2013, whether it goes into confidential agenda with the public and press being excluded, as some of the information may relate to financial or business affairs of a particular person or organisation. And we deemed the following items, the subsequent items of that category. So can I have a proposer to go into closed session, please?
Yeah, happy to propose, David.
Thank you, Graham. Seconder?
That was David proposed, but I'll second.
All right, okay. Yeah, we'll take it that as David proposed and Graham second. So everybody in favour?
Yep.
Thank you. So we can now move forward to the confidential thing. Do we want to stop recording or something, or